Hey everyone, Zeddy here again today with a brand new video, and it's tier list time. And yet again, I took a look through the comments in last week's tier list video and saw one of the highest voted comments was to take a look at every single card that has been Hall of Famed in Hearthstone history and rank it on a tier list. So that's what we're going to do today. Before we get started, I just want to do a quick friendly reminder. About 64% of my viewers are not yet subscribed. And if you feel I've earned your subscription today, I would really appreciate it. Last time I mentioned it, it was insane. You got, I think we got like 400 subs in a couple of days. So thought I'd throw that out there again. That percentage still kind of stays the same despite the fact we've had so many people sub. But if you think I've earned it, I would really appreciate it. Get us closer to that 10,000 subscriber goal. Anyways, enough of the shilling, enough of the hard selling. Let's get into tier list and take a look at every single card that's been Hall of Famed in Hearthstone's history and rate it from tier S to F, with tier S being a god tier auto-include card and tier F being unplayable garbage you would never want to put into your deck. So, first, starting with Acolyte of Pain. Originally in the classic set, it's a 3-mana 1/3 minion, neutral minion that every time it takes damage, you draw a card. So Acolyte was really good in, decks that could do whirlwind effects. So Warrior loved this card. You have like Whirlwind, Deathspite, Warpath, so many different activators over the years for this card. Fantastic there. We've even seen it in like OTK Paladin where you get Elven Archer it. We've seen it in Priest with like Wild Pyromancer and Norshark Cleric and Circle, all that stuff. This card was used a ton as a really good neutral draw option. And, well, Team 5 felt like they didn't want to have the neutral set have that strong a draw card, and they took it out and Hall of Famed it last year. Very strong card. I wouldn't put it like as an S tier card, but it's been used in a ton of decks throughout the years and still sees play in WoW today. I'll give it a very high A. It's not quite S, but incredibly powerful tool to draw, and one of my favorite cards of all time. I think it was a really well-designed card, and I was really sad to see it got Hall of Famed. Next, we have Auchenite Soul Priest. It's a Priest minion. It was Hall of Famed in the whole changing of the way Priest was made. They're redesigning of it last year. And it's a 4-mana 3/5, and your healing spells or effects basically turn to damage until this minion is dead. It has an active effect. So he played Auchenite with Circle of Healing. That's like one of the most notorious combos where you get a 4 AoE, a 4 damage AoE for 4 mana effectively. And you could, use your hero power to push damage. There's all sorts of janky combos we've seen over the years, like Zombie Chow or Corrupted Healbot, where you could use Auchenite in that regard. But overall, it wasn't the most powerful Priest card. It saw play here and there. Auchenite Circle kind of fell out of favor because there's just so many AoE options for Priest, and it just, wasn't really worth it. And when it got rotated to Wild, it basically wasn't really seeing any play in Standard for the most part anymore, and doesn't really see play in Wild at all right now. So I'll give it a B. It's a relatively powerful card, just has had its place in the meta, but in recent years just really hasn't popped up a heck of a lot. Next, we have Azure Drake, a neutral minion. It's a dragon. It's a 5-mana 4/4. Spell damage +1 and Battlecry, draw a card. This was one of the first Hall of Fame cards ever and was like an auto-include staple in many, many decks. Rogue loved it. It worked well with, prep spells like prep Phantom Knives, Backstab, things like that before prep was nerfed, of course. And yeah, every other deck that just wanted some draw and a minion, it was really good. And yeah, it saw a ton of play and got Hall of Fame for that reason. But as the years have gone on, this card just really has been power creeped out of the game. 5-mana 4/4 draw card just really isn't good enough. You pretty much never see this card in Wild outside of like the Auto Reno Priest build that might like be built around dragons and might run this. But hell, there's pretty much a better option now in Big Ol' Whelp. It doesn't have spell damage, but it's a 5-mana 5/5, and a lot of the times the spell damage is irrelevant. Big Ol' Whelps is better. A really iconic card in the classic set, but has been power creeped out of relevance. I'll give it a B. It used to be basically an S, but for me, it's fallen all the way down to a B, where you just rarely ever see Azure Drake pop up. Next, we have Baku, the Moon Eater, 9-mana 7/8, neutral beast. At the start of your game, if your deck contains only odd cost cards, you get an upgraded hero power. We all know this card is insane. It got Hall of Famed a year early. We had never seen that before, and Baku was one of the main reasons for that, and still sees a ton of play in Wild today, whether it be Odd Rogue, Odd Warrior, Odd Paladin. It's just incredibly powerful, even so much that Odd Shaman's decent with totems of all things. Like, card's insane, and upgraded hero power for the entirety of the game is just so powerful. It makes your game plan so consistent that I couldn't put it anywhere lower than an S. One of the most powerful cards ever made in Hearthstone. Next, we have Black Cat. This is a mage minion, 3 mana, 3/3, spell damage +1, and it was a Baku-related card. If your deck contain no odd cost cards, you draw a card. So, yeah, it was like Azure Drake for 3, and, you know, that was pretty good, but you had to only play, it only worked in Odd Mage, and Odd Mage was, it was okay. It's seen play both standard and wild. It's been a decent deck. Never like tier 1. It's been like a tier 2, tier 3 at best deck, but it was good. In Black Cat's, you know, you're throwing it in there. It's a 3 mana 3/3 draw card, spell damage +1. It's decent. It's good. I'll throw it with Azure Drake in that kind of territory, but nothing like mind-blowing. Just a very solid card. Got Hall of Famed a year early, but more because, well, for Hall of Faming Baku early, you're going to go along with that. And that goes for pretty much all of the non-Baku and Gen cards, by the way. They all got Hall of Famed early because of Baku and Gen, not particularly because they were super strong. Next, we have Captain's Parrot. You might not even be aware this card exists. 2 mana 1/1 beast, Battlecry, draw a pirate from your deck. This was like a reward card. There used to be reward cards in Hearthstone, so with this, I believe if you had collected every single pirate in the classic set, you were automatically given Captain's Parrot. So you could draw those pirates, but, I mean, this card's terrible. It's 2 mana 1/1, draw a pirate. Like, I guess you could compare it to Novice Engineer that tutors, but I've literally only ever seen this card, I think, played once, like, in a real deck, and that's recently, in Dead Man's Hand Warrior, because you could draw your risky skipper with it. But even then, it wasn't really worth it. It got cut, don't really see it pop up, and yeah, it was this kind of weird, cool little Easter egg reward card back in the day, and they just put in the Hall of Fame when they did their first Hall of Fame rotation. I'll give it an F, honestly. Like, it's just really never been a real card, but, you know, it's kind of cool. It's it draws a pirate, I guess. I don't know. It's just kind of garbage. Not really ever been a thing. Next, we have Cold Light Oracle. It's a 3 mana 2/2 neutral Murloc. Battlecry, each player draws 2 cards. A staple in mill decks. Staple like Odd Warrior, you're going through your fatigue win condition. You can just play it in like a combo deck where you want to draw like Exodia Mage, or I've seen it in Reno Priest, things like that. And it's just an incredibly powerful card to be able to draw 2 for 3 mana, to be able to mill your opponent, potentially destroy a combo piece, something like that, or just kill them in fatigue, because fatigue damage is like the most powerful damage in Hearthstone. Nothing scales higher than that. Incredibly powerful, really degenerate in a lot of ways. People hate Cold Light. It's why I got Hall of Fame, because, well, it's not much fun to have your whole game plan destroyed by them milling you to death. And, you know, it's had its weaknesses. It's typically any deck that Cold Light's in, outside of Odd Warrior, has been pretty weak to aggro and things like that. But overall, incredibly powerful card. Still sees a lot of play in Wild today. Would see play in Standard. I would have absolutely no doubt about that. I'm going to give it an S. It is a very, very powerful, often can be meta warping and defining card depending on what the deck is, whether it's Mill Kingsbane Rogue or, like I said, Odd Warrior or things like that. It's incredibly powerful. Dead Man's Hand Warrior loves this card. Just really good. I'm going to give it an S, and it's one of my favorite cards of all time. And it did deserve to get a Hall of Fame, but I'm glad I get to play it in Wild still. Next, we have Conceal, a 1 mana rogue spell, and it gives your minions stealth for until the next turn. And back in the old days, you would play Auctioneer for 5 and then Conceal it, or you could get some questings and give that Conceal and then buff them up. And it was very powerful. It was very non-interactive, which is why it ended up getting Hall of Fame. They didn't really want that to remain in the game for the most part, but once it went to Wild, this card just doesn't see play. Like, Miracle Rogue is too slow. It's not a thing in Wild, and everything to give Conceal, like, it's too slow. Wild is much too fast. And one of the problems in Wild is AoEs are so efficient, so good, that Conceal just doesn't typically protect your minions anymore. You have, like, Plague of Flames, you have Zephyrus, you have so many different ways of dealing with things that are Concealed that you just never see this card see play anymore. But it was a good, very strong rogue card back in the old days, just kind of isn't that relevant anymore, so I'll give it a B. You know, it's just fallen down the chain. It just doesn't really pop up. Honestly, it should be a C, but for its historical impact and for how powerful it has been, I will give it that honorary B, but low B. Next, we have Divine Favor, a paladin spell. It's 3 mana, and you draw cards. As many cards as your opponent has cards in their hand. So your opponent has 0 cards, this draws nothing. If they have 10 cards and you have none, you get 10 cards. You fill your hand. It's one of the most busted, aggressive card draw cards ever. Not so much as busted as like Secret Passage, probably, but It's up there, it's ridiculous, and it's still auto-include in many, many aggressive Paladin decks, whether it be Odd Paladin, or a Murloc Paladin, or Hand Buff Mech Paladin. Just incredibly powerful. One of my most frustrated, most hated cards of all time, for it punishes you for not playing cards as the opponent. It's just frustrating, punishing you for playing slow decks, but you know, that it existed for a long time. It got a Hall of Fame for that reason, but it's an S tier card, incredibly powerful, and Paladin would love to have this back in Standard, I can tell you that much. Ridiculously strong card. Next we have Divine Spirit, pre-spell, 2 mana, double a minion's health. Staple in Combo Priest for its entire run. Divine Spirit, Inner Fire, kill your opponent. Ridiculous. Really good. When Shadow Visions was introduced, you get even more Divine Spirits and Radiant Elemental. But even with those cards gone, we saw, like last year, Combo Priest still be tier 1. And of course, Divine Spirit is a big part of it. And they didn't like the interactivity of being able to just double Divine Spirit OTK an opponent with just like 1 minion, so got Hall of Famed. And Combo Priest is still relevant today in Wild. It is still a relatively good deck, and Divine Spirit has just been a powerhouse in that deck for such a long time. I'll give it a very high A. I'm not willing to give it an S just because it's not at that meta warping level as the other cards. It only really fits into one deck, unlike the other cards I've mentioned so far, but man, it's really close. It's a really close candidate to S tier. Next, we have Doomguard, Warlock Minion, 5 mana, 5/7, charge demon that Battlecry discards 2 cards from your hand, which, if you know a discard Warlock these days, that's not really much of a downside. So it's been a staple in Zeus since pretty much day 1. It's good in Q-Block as well. Cubing a Doomguard, getting multiple Doomguards is just insane damage and just ridiculous against any slower deck. And yeah, like I said, in discard Warlock, it can draw you 3 cards now. Summon a Silverware Golem. It can buff your minions on board. It can do incredible work. It's just an insanely good card. It's been in so many different Warlock decks throughout the years. I have to give it an S. Incredibly powerful demon. Charge is one of the most busted mechanics out there because you just can't really stop it. And yeah, Doomguard does a good job of it. Plus, it's really hard to kill. So the next 2 cards are a little bit unique. They're both neutral legendaries, and they were both like reward legendaries. They weren't part of the classic set. You got them through either like getting a BlizzCon ticket or spending money in the shop, stuff like that. You could get them golden through those means as well. You could, of course, craft them now and all that, but yeah. Anyways, we'll start with the first one, which is Gelbin Mkhitaryan, is a 6 mana 6/6 legendary, and had a battle cry of summoning an awesome invention, and there was 4 of them. One would give a minion +1/+1, a random minion at the end of your turn. At the start of your turn, you would just the minion would destroy itself and draw 3 cards. Another one at the start of your turn, transform a random minion into a 1/1 chicken. This could backfire horribly. And then there was another one at the end of your turn, restore 6 health to a damaged character. So the draw one, pretty good. The buff one could be good if it was your minion. It's any minion. And again, same with the healing. They were just kind of all over the place. Not particularly consistent. Yes, drawing a card's great, but it was a 0/1 that could get killed. But anyways, it was a cool, flavorful meme card, but not really competitive. You could throw it in a deck, you could high roll with it, maybe do some good work with it, but overall, not really ever competitive, not really that great. I don't think it's as bad as like a Captain's Parrot, so we'll give it a C, but yeah, it was never all that competitive. And the other legendary, as mentioned, was Elite Torrent Chieftain. It was a 5 mana 5/5 and a battle cry. Give both players the power to rock. So what exactly was that? Basically what that meant was you would add a spell to each player's hand, and there was 3 different spells. One would be summon 3, 4, or 5 1/1 Murlocs, so that was random. Summon a random Horde Warrior, that could be a Frostwolf Grunt or a Cairn, and many other Horde minions. And then you had deal 4 damage and draw cards. So of the options, the only really like good consistent one was the Rogues Do It one, a deal 4 damage, draw card. Horde Warrior, you could really low roll, you could high roll, but overall this card, again, was never meant to be competitive, never really meant to be a good card, just kind of cool. Has a really sick entrance animation. If you haven't seen it before, look it up, it's really rad. And yeah, I mean, people love just the flavor of it, the animation of it, but it was never a competitive card, but, you know, pretty cool. We'll put it with Gelbin there. You know, not exactly complete garbage, but definitely not at the playable level as a lot of these other Hall of Fame cards. Speaking of playable level, the next one we have is another card that was Hall of Famed earlier. Again, Greymane, 6 mana 6/5. Start of the game if your deck consists of only even cost cards. Your hero power costs 1. Again, incredibly powerful. especially in decks like even Shaman, even Paladin was very good for quite some time. Even Rogue saw some play, and yeah, got it Hall of Famed early just for how powerful it was. Today, it still sees a good amount of play, especially with even Shaman. Even Lock pops up here and there. Just incredibly powerful to have that consistent, cheap hero power that just can synergize so well with the remainder of your deck. And as a result, got Hall of Famed early with Baku. I wouldn't say it's as good as Baku, but it's certainly an S tier minion. One of the best ever as well. We'll definitely put it as a high S. Next, we have Glitter Moth. This is a card. It's a 5 mana 4/4 beast for Priest. Battlecry, so it's Baku related. If you have no odd cost cards, you double the health of all friendly minions. This card was terrible. Like, even if you would play odd Priest, you probably wouldn't play Glitter Moth because the reward of this is just so awful. Like, just, it was slow, and you have to have the board, and I guess you could run Inner Fire and try and make this work, but it never paid off. I literally never saw this in a competitive, even remotely competitive deck. Sure, you can meme and say your Odd Priest deck was great at like Diamond 10 on the last day of the month, you know, I guess, but overall, horrible card. I'm going to give it an F. It got Hall of Fame a year early, but trust me, it had nothing to do with the power level of that card. Next, we have Gloomstag. It's a 5 mana 2/6 beast for Druid, and it's Taunt and a Battle Cry if your deck is only odd cost cards, gain +2/+2. So you could play this in Odd Druid, which wasn't the worst deck in the world. It wasn't great. It's got better in Wild, actually, over the years, where you actually see it pop up here and there. It's not exactly competitive, but it's not the worst thing in the world. And, I mean, Gloomstag is a 5 mana 4/8 Taunt, is pretty solid. And, yeah, it's just never really been a Tier 1, Tier 2, or basically Tier 3 deck. It's just been in, like, an okay fringe, mediocre deck you can kind of probably win a few games with. So we'll give it a C. Just never really good enough to really elevate Odd Druid to be something more than like an okay deck, but not the worst thing in the world. Next, we have a Priest spell, Holy Fire, 6 mana, deal 5 damage, restore 5 health to the hero. Yeah, I saw this card every once in a while, whether it be like Reno Priest or just, you know, Priest decks that were 5 damage lined up really well in the meta. But overall, you didn't run Holy Fire a heck of a lot. It was a decent spell. It was okay. Saw its play, but more or less got Hall of Fame because they really wanted to take all damage spells away from Priest for whatever reason. And yeah, I'll give it a B. It has seen its play. It's done its work. But overall, there's just usually more efficient things to do than 6 mana deal 5. Next, we have the Mage Secret Ice Block. Basically, your hero becomes immune if they take fatal damage this turn, so you can't die. It protects you against any lethal damage. The only way to get through it is, well, you make them take damage on their turn, or you remove it with like an Eater of Secrets. This has been one of the most powerful secrets of all time, probably the most powerful secret of all time. Well, I did give it that on our tier list. But anyways, incredibly powerful. Just making your hero immune, giving yourself that extra turn, whether it be in a Reno deck where you get to Reno after, or a combo deck where you're stalling to kill your opponent, or just an aggro deck where you're stalling to kill your opponent. It's just an incredibly powerful effect to give yourself 1 or 2 extra turns. And yeah, it's an S tier card, absolutely. One of the most busted ones ever. And one of the most hated ones. People don't really miss Ice Block in Standard, trust me on that. Next, we have Ice Lance, 1 mana spell for a mage. You freeze an enemy, and if it's already frozen, you deal 4 damage. So it's a staple in old school freeze mage. You could play it in like burn mage. You could play it, even I've seen it in secret mage, where you put it frost bolts and ice lances and use that with your Aluneth, and has kind of fallen out of favor in Wild. You don't typically see it a heck of a lot, but it was a very powerful card. It popped up even in quest mage lists. Good with Apprentice to stall stuff out, but like Ray of Frost and all that, it's kind of taken over its position, but saw a lot of play historically in Hearthstone and still pops up here or there. I'll give it an A. It's done a lot of good stuff, and 1 mana deal 4, especially like spell damage, can really pile up. Next, we have Leeroy Jenkins, recently Hall of Fame charged minion. It's a neutral, 5 mana 6/2, charge Battlecry, summon 2/1/1 whelps for your opponent. One of the best aggro minions ever made. Was 4 mana at one point, was still insane at 5. Still sees play in nearly every aggro deck in Wild as long as they can run it. Incredibly powerful. Staple in like Rogue with Shadow Steps, all that kind of stuff. Hell, even Reno Lock used to run it. You'd go Leeroy, Power Overwhelming Faceless for a 20 damage combo. It's just been an incredibly versatile, crazy good card. Absolutely S tier, no doubt about it. Incredibly card. And who doesn't love the voice line of Leeroy Jenkins? Next, we have a Priest spell, Mind Blast, 2 mana, deal 5 damage to the enemy hero. For a long time, this card wasn't really that great. You had Velen Mind Blast, sure, but it wasn't really enough. But then with cards like Radiant Elemental got introduced, Shadow Reaper Anduin, all of a sudden Mind Blast became a heck of a lot better, either cheating it out with like Malygos, Velen, or just playing it with Shadow Reaper Anduin and getting an insane amount of damage. That really elevated the card from being a kind of a fringe card to a pretty good card, and still pops up in WoW. People still do run it in their Reno Priest lists. The meta is slow enough where you want that extra reach, it can be very good. We'll give it an A, kind of in that Ice Lance territory, just a very versatile burn card. It's just, Ice Lance started off strong and has kind of faded off, whereas Mind Blast kind of started off weak, but it picked up steam as it went along. Next, we have Mind Control Tech, 3 mana, 3/3 neutral minion. Battlecry, if your opponent has 4 or more minions, you get to steal 1 randomly. One of the most rage-inducing cards of all time is banned from Arena, and then eventually Hall of Famed. Not exactly the most fun, where you go wide on the board, and then you have a bunch of little dudes and maybe a big one, and then they steal the big one, you lose the game. It's very infuriating. That kind of RNG, that swing could be just gross, but it had its place to like stop the vomit decks to an extent. But overall, people really wanted this guy to go, and it went, and I don't think it's really missed by many. Doesn't see much play in WoW these days, but it was a very prolific card for a long time, whether it be in like Quest Shaman or just Druid liked it because it struggled with wide boards. And very powerful card, very rage-inducing. We'll give it an A, but yeah, I don't think a lot of us missed that one at all either. So we have Multigiant, it's a 20 mana 8/8 elemental, and it costs 1 less for each damage your hero has taken. So if you're at 10 health, it costs 0. Staple in decks like Handlock, Holy Wrath, Paladin. You see it in Evenlock. We saw it in Darklair Warlock, Naga Sea Witch Warlock when that was a thing. The card's just incredibly powerful. Hell, you could play it with High Priest the Call in Paladin and cheat it out for 0 mana. This has been a really good card in a lot of decks over the years. Kind of disappeared off the meta in Wild for quite some time, but recently with the strength of Evenlock, with the strength of Darklair Warlock, incredibly powerful. I want to give it an S, but I'm going to give it a very high A. It just hasn't been that consistent, but I think a lot of that did have to do with it getting nerfed to 25 mana originally. I'll probably have to reconsider this one as time goes on. Maybe it is an S, but right now I feel it's just on that borderline of just not quite there. It's just not that meta defining, but oh, it's a close one. It's a close one. Next, we have Mountain Giant, a 12 mana 8/8 elemental, neutral elemental, and it costs 1 less for each card in your hand. So again, Handlock loved this, Evenlock loves this, Conjurer's Mage liked it because you could conjure and get a 7/8 taunt with it. Yeah, the Giant decks as well, and you know, even Q-Block ran this for quite some time until they had better stuff to do. Incredibly iconic Giant, got Hall of Famed recently. It's just so ridiculously good. It's always been meta. And like every single meta in Standard and Wild, this card has always popped up. It's always been there because cheating out 8/8s early is just incredibly powerful. And it's going to be an S for me. It's just popped up way too many times in way too many archetypes to not be included as an S tier minion. Next, we have Merk Spark Eel, 2 mana 2/3 Shaman minion. If your deck contains only even cost cards, it deals 2 damage. So, you know, it's a staple in Even Shaman. It's really good in that deck. Even Shaman's been really good, and it's a good part of the deck. It's going to stay there probably forever because it's just an incredibly powerful effect. I'll give it an A. It doesn't really define the deck, but it's just a really good tool in it, and yeah, it's a solid A. Next, we have Naturalize, Druid spell, 1 mana, destroy a minion. Your opponent draws 2 cards, so you can use this in like a fatigue deck. You can use it to mill your opponent. You can just use it as removal because 1 mana, destroy a minion's pretty good, and Druid has like absolutely garbage removal outside of like the Spellstone or like Poison Seeds. And yeah, got Hall of Fame because, well, they want Druid to not have good hard removal. And of course the mill aspect of it can be quite frustrating. They've really eliminated mill for the most part from Standard, so I'll give this card an A. It's never been like a super auto-include prevalent Druid card, but it definitely has seen a lot of play over the years in several different archetypes, but just not as powerful as a lot of these other cards. Next, we have Norshark Cleric, 1 mana 1/3 Priest minion. Whenever a friendly minion is healed, you draw a card. So never go full Norshire. You can kill yourself if like a million minions get healed and oh my god, the goodness, things can go terribly wrong. But overall, this card is one of the most powerful priest minions, one of the most powerful one-drops of all time. Being able to draw cards, snowball with this, buff it up with Divine Spirit, all sorts of stuff is incredibly powerful. And hell, even Reno Priest today runs this card with no real synergy outside of just your hero power, and it's still completely worth it. Incredibly powerful, absolute S tier priest minion, and got Hall of Famed for a reason. People like always like, why is Norshark so freaking good? Next, we have Old Murkai. It's a 4 mana 2/4 charge Murloc. It's +1 for each other Murloc on the battlefield. This was like I believe this was a reward Murloc. If you unlocked every classic Murloc in the classic set, you were given Old Murkai, and then eventually got Hall of Fame. So, and then you had to craft it. You can no longer get it for free, but really powerful in any Murloc deck. It's a charge. It can get buffed up pretty easily. You get an anything Paladin because it comes back and it's just super big and threatening. And yeah, incredibly powerful Murloc in those decks. And is it S tier? It's like that Molten Giant territory where it's a really good Murloc. It's very powerful, but I just can't put it in the same league of these minions that are just been so ridiculous over the years. It's just below that. To have power overwhelming, 1 mana Warlock spell, give a minion, friendly minion, +4/+4. It then dies horribly, so it'll die at the end of your turn. Very good aggressive card in Zoo. You can use as a combo card with Leeroy, Faceless, as I mentioned earlier. Just very solid. It was like auto-include in Zoo for basically until it got Hall of Fame. It was just so good. But you don't see it a heck of a lot in Wild. It's just better stuff to do, which is incredible for how strong this card was for a long time. Heck, it even had synergy with Shadow Flame, cards like that, but fallen off a lot, but it's still incredibly powerful. We'll put it like that Mind Blast territory. Still pops up here and there. Not quite the absolute insane Zoo card it used to be, or combo card it used to be, but still very good. Next, we have Prophet Velen. 7 mana, 7/7, legendary for Priest. It doubles the damage and healing of your spells, or your hero power. And yeah, we've all know Velen OTK with like Malagos and Cloning Gallery was really good. It was good with Reno Priest, although now you just kind of use Spawn and Shadows. You don't want to screw up your Polkelt, but iconic legendary. And then it kind of became a War Golem after Mind Blast got Hall of Fame before it, and then it got Hall of Famed, and well, now you can't play it in Standard. I'm gonna give this one, I'll put it with Mind Blast. It's basically in that same territory where it has been very meta at times, and then at other times is completely absent. It was basically, was there stuff to enable it? Was there a Radiant Elemental in the meta to enable it? Was there a Shadow Reaper Anduin? Was there a Xerix Cloning Gallery? If there wasn't, this card didn't really stand up on its own, but with those cards working with it, definitely elevated it to be a very strong card. Next, we have Ragnaros, 8 mana, 8/8 elemental neutral. It can't attack, but it deals 8 damage to a random enemy. We all have seen tons of highlights of Ragnaros hitting that 1-in-8 shot to lethal an opponent. Even with Frostledge Jaina, could gain lifesteal. All these janky combos you could pull off like Carnivorous Cube. Big Priest would resummon it. Could cheat it out with Darkest Hour. Or you just throw it into a deck because it's an incredibly powerful minion. Still pops up in Wild today, although 8 mana for a minion is just incredibly expensive these days. And even though it does have a direct impact immediately, it's just not enough anymore in Wild. But still, I'm giving it an S tier. This card has done so much work throughout the history of Hearthstone. And still pops up today. It still pops up in a lot of like the bigger decks that I gotta give it that S tier treatment. Next, we have Shadow Form. It's a 3 mana spell for Priest. And it changes your hero power to deal 2 damage. And if you play it again, it deals 3 damage. Not exactly a very good card. It never really saw realistic play in Priest. But, you know, it wasn't bad. Like, it was an okay, like, arena pick or a discover option sometimes. Like, it was okay. Not, like, F-tier garbage or anything, but definitely never really meta warping or present. We'll give it a C, but yeah, not exactly the best spell out there. Next, we have Spellbreaker, neutral minion. It's a 4 mana 4/3 Battlecry, silence a minion. Got Hall of Fame recently. They just want silence to not really be prevalent, especially in a neutral set. All we have is Owl now, and that card sucks. And well, Spellbreaker was better than that because it gave better tempo as a 4 mana 4/3 and saw a good amount of play. And, you know, doesn't see much play in Wild, but it pops up here and there. I'll give Spellbreakers a B. It fits into that middle of the road. Like, you know, it was a decent tech option to get through taunts and aggressive decks. Like, you know, you could throw it in an even deck, something like that. But overall, Spellbreaker was never really that problematic, that, you know, huge in the meta. It was just a tech choice, and I don't think I can rate it more than a B. Next, we have Sylvanas, 6 mana, 5/5, neutral, legendary, Death Rattle. You get to steal a random minion from your opponent. It was very good early on throughout the history of Hearthstone. Being able to steal a minion was very valuable, but nowadays, spending 6 mana to play a minion that doesn't do anything and only steals 1 minion just isn't really enough, especially in Wild. Like, it's so fast-paced, so degenerate. Like, you rarely ever see a Sylvanas. Even with cards like Cube and Play Dead and N'Zoth existing, you just don't see Sylvanas that much anymore. But for how powerful she was throughout the history of Hearthstone, I'll give her an A. I'll give her that respect, but she pretty much isn't really at that level anymore. And lastly, we have Vanish, a rogue spell. Really good in like a mill deck or quest decks. You know, decks where you're playing the long game and trying to bounce things or just mill your opponent. It could be very powerful. It could be a very frustrating card. And that's right why it got Hall of Famed. Was it really ever a meta warping card? Possibly only if you consider when Quest Rogue was really powerful. Other than that, maybe Mill Kingsbane Rogue utilized it pretty well. But I wouldn't really put it as an A. It's more, again, in this B territory. I'll give it a very high B. But when's the last time you really saw Vanish in Wild? Outside of like Mill Rogue, which doesn't realistically beat much of anything. Anyways, that's it. That is all of my rankings. Every single Hall of Fame card ranked. Let me know in the comments below, what do you agree, disagree with, and as always, suggest what we should cover in our next tier list. If you like the video, please like and subscribe. And again, if you can help us get towards that 10,000 subscriber mark, hit that sub button. I'd really appreciate it. Have a great day. Stay salty, my friends.